My name is Mark Hammond. I'm a documentary and feature film director. I'm based in Malta. I was born in the Midwest in America. Spent a lot of time in New York, and the last 20 years I've been working in European cinema.
Mark, please tell me about your movie. Traitor.
My film is set in the 1970s in the KGB-controlled Odesa Film Studios, and I was interested in the film because it's a character piece. The main character is a young student who just graduated from the Moscow Film Institute. And basically, she's in a position to take a movie that is considered to be off script, politically incorrect. And she's given the task to censor the movie. My film was about this particular character, and it was wonderfully played by Zoya Baranowska. It's a young woman who's in a situation where she's forced to, A, respond to political pressure, B, through the process, discover, is what she's doing true or false? Is this censorship correct or not? She has questions. So she reaches out to the director of what you see as the film in the film and began to understand what the truth of the Bolshevik invasion was. As a result of her queries, she then speaks with her grandmother to discern the truth. So this is what this film is about, because censorship, of course, is a very contemporary issue. It's an ongoing issue. Censorship of the press is a global phenomenon. So that's why, within this context, I thought it was a very interesting proposal, and that's why I co-scripted the script, right? Not in relationship to tell the story about the Bolshevik invasion. I didn't care about that. What I cared about was this young woman who's in a position to decide for herself what the truth of the situation is and then do something about it. And as you've seen in the end of the film, she makes a decision after re-editing the film to the KGB studio criteria. She sneaks back in her edit room, reassembles the film according to the director's vision. This is the stance she takes. As a result, of course, she's going to experience terrible problems. So we see at the very end of the film a car close to the Black Sea, which is a very subtle scene because what we hear over the radio is a Radio-Free Europe broadcast talking about how to escape the Eastern Bloc, how to cross over the border. So we infer by that last scene that they have escaped, right? And that they have moved into Western Europe. This is what the film was about.
How you became interested in this story?
Well, I was interested in the material, even though I'm not Ukrainian, because I spent many years in Europe. I work a lot in Lithuania, but family background includes grandparents from what is present-day Slovenia, which was then Yugoslavia. And a funny story about my grandmother is one day she showed me a photo album, and in the back of it was a check for $100 US. I asked her about it, and at first she was very reluctant to tell me. The check itself was signed by Tito, and this money was given to her family when they confiscated the property in order to use it for politicians and VIPs to summer there because they're up in the mountains in a very cool district. So she had direct experience and had to emigrate to New York, both part of the family pre-war, part after the war.
How you started working in Ukraine?
I'd never heard much of Ukraine, never crossed my path. And that mutual associates introduced me to a company run by Andrei Syorka, and they had a film that they wanted to distribute internationally and needed an editor for the film. Now, basically, the film had already been completed, so bringing in an international editor on another director's film is a very sensitive undertaking. So when I first arrived in Ukraine, there was big drama about my presence, and the director was very reluctant to have somebody else re-edit his film. Nonetheless, I did the job, and at the screening after the edit, the director came up to me very, very pleased, and he said to me, "Thank you for respecting my film." So that story ended very well, and made many relationships in Ukraine, and ultimately it led to me directing The Traitor.
Why do you think your movie is important in modern context?
Well, I think the parallels, in terms of The Traitor, the parallels today come down to what we've seen increasingly since the beginning of the Ukraine war and in other arenas, the extent and in many ways the success of Putin's propaganda. The propaganda which justified the invasion of Ukraine, the interference in European politics, the concerted effort, and in many ways successful effort, to convince the Russian people, as well as some Ukrainian people of Russian origins living on the eastern front of Ukraine, that this war was justified, that Russia had the right to occupy this territory. And of course, this is a complete construct from Putin. Nonetheless, in relationship to the power of information, or in this case, the power of disinformation, we have to be very aware on what is the truth, what is coming out from the Russian propaganda machine, and how we have to be very circumspect and analyze and parse the truth from the fiction.
Last question. You work with documentary films as well as fiction. What is the difference between making these two kinds of film?
Very good question. Vladimir, look, right, to put it really short, when you're producing a feature film, when you're directing a feature film, writing a feature film, you want authenticity. You want it to be like a documentary so the audience feels it's real. When you're doing a documentary, you don't have control. As Hitchcock says, documentaries are when God directs, right? But you're looking at the frame, you're looking at the interview, thinking, oh, if only they would say this, if only I could direct that, if only I could make this shot happen. But you can't, right? So it's a funny conflict between the two disciplines, feature and documentary, right? The interesting thing about documentary, because I shoot myself, is the experience of the frame. In other words, you're in a frame, you're shooting something real, something live, right? You feel that presence, you feel that energy, you feel the immediacy, you feel the veracity, you feel the truth. And no matter what you're filming, the emotions are in fact much bigger than when you're shooting a feature film. Even if the story creates or asks for a particular dramatic moment, which is very emotional, right? And it's only when the actors themselves, in their interpretation of character, their interpretation of the scene, their delivery, if they enter that moment of truth, that moment of veracity, suddenly the gulf, the divide between documentaries and feature films disappears, because you're getting the truth in both instances. But that's rare. But it happens. As as I say, it's quite strange going back and forth between the two disciplines, because in a documentary, you want more control, but you have no control. In a feature film, you have total control, but you would like something not in control, spontaneous, immediate, authentic, truthful.
It is not difficult to cross the Iron Curtain if you know how. When you get to the border zone, 3 miles from the frontier, get off the road. They are checked. Continue cautiously through the fields or woods till you reach that 500-yard zone just before the barbed wire. Then get on your hands and knees and crawl. If you see the border guard, don't run.